Oceans Without Borders is a marine conservation program that's a partnership between andBeyond, an impact-driven luxury travel company, and their not-for-profit partner, Africa Foundation, who are focused on community development. And together, they're working to support marine conservation solutions across the span of andBeyond's marine footprint in East Africa. And this includes Nemba Island off the northeast coast of Zanzibar in Tanzania, Vamizi Island in the Carimbos archipelago of remote northern Mozambique, at the Bazarus archipelago where we have Bangura Island in southern central Mozambique. And across each of these sites, Oceans Without Borders is looking to support marine conservation programs and initiatives, work with local communities to really build local capacity, facilitate world-class research to support data-driven decision-making, and then also to work with our guests to ensure that we're building awareness around the marine conservation challenges facing this region. Climate change is driven by an increase in the greenhouse gases that surround our planet. And these gases are actually a very normal and very important part of our atmosphere. So they form this protective layer around the planet, much like a greenhouse forms a warm protective layer around young plants that are growing. And it acts like a blanket, so it keeps the sun's heat close to the earth. And it's exactly the reason why we're able to grow such beautiful, diverse ecosystems on our planet. The problem now is that we're changing the balance. So we're putting an excess of these greenhouse gases, and particularly carbon dioxide, into our atmosphere. We're effectively creating a thicker blanket around our planet. And this means that we're trapping more and more of the sun's heat close to the earth. And with more heat and energy trapped around the earth, we're starting to see changes like more extreme weather systems and weather events happening. We're also seeing that we're getting a shift in the distribution of habitats as plants choose to grow in different places as the weather systems change. We're seeing changing dynamics in our annual weather systems and seasonal cycles. And then this is obviously upsetting a lot of the animal movement as well, so there are changes in migration patterns. And our oceans are not immune to this either. It turns out that our oceans are incredibly good at absorbing all of this carbon dioxide and heat that we're putting into our atmosphere. As the oceans are heating up, we're seeing that there's a melting at the polar ice caps, so we're losing our frozen regions on our planet, and this is causing ocean levels to rise, which has very severe impacts on low-lying areas like our island nations. We're also seeing that habitats in our oceans that are used to living in a very narrow range of temperatures are becoming stressed. So coral reefs, for example, they're used to living in a very narrow temperature band, so they live close to the equator, where temperatures don't change very much. And when the corals get stressed, we see an event which we call coral bleaching, where the corals go white, and if the bleaching is severe, then they may die. And coral bleaching is leading to huge devastation around the world in coral reef ecosystems. And if the corals die in an ecosystem, they take the foundation out of the entire ecosystem, so all the things that rely on them are then in jeopardy as well. We're also seeing that because our oceans are so good at absorbing carbon dioxide, they're actually starting to become more acidic. And this has really potentially strong impacts on how many of our marine organisms are able to build their skeletons. Phytoplankton and zooplankton, so all the little creatures that form the basis of our global fisheries, they too are struggling to build their skeletons. And when you take the very foundation out of that ecosystem, then you start to threaten everything that relies on that further up. Carbon offsetting is a way for us to effectively try to neutralize the negative impact we have when we release excess carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So things like driving our car, flying in an aeroplane to travel to amazing destinations, buying goods that have been manufactured in factories, and all of these activities require burning fuel. When we go about all these normal activities in our daily modern lives, we're releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So to attempt to restore the balance, we can potentially offset these emissions. And this is what we mean by carbon offsets. So to do this, we need to find ways and support people that are working and focusing on projects that actually absorb carbon rather than release them. Ways to do this is to plant plants. So we often hear about planting forests because plants are very good at taking up carbon dioxide, which they then use for photosynthesis to grow their leaves and their stems. Through identifying programs that are doing this sort of work, that are rehabilitating habitats or protecting habitats, that absorb a huge amount of carbon dioxide, we can potentially neutralize the impact of our carbon emissions on a daily basis. Our oceans play a very important role in the carbon cycle on our planet. They in fact cycle up to 83% of all of the carbon that is cycled through our oceans and our atmosphere. And the ocean is what we call a carbon sink. So it effectively takes up more carbon than it releases. Because it has this amazing ability, it plays a very, very important role on our planet to equalize the balance of carbon dioxide and to reduce the level of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. The problem is that we're producing more carbon dioxide than our oceans are able to absorb. There are two key processes in terms of how the oceans actually absorb this carbon. And this is where our ocean water actually just absorbs carbon dioxide directly from the atmosphere. And then this water is then channeled down to the deep oceans and carried in our currents, where it gets locked away in these really deep layers of the oceans for many, many hundreds of thousands of years. In a similar way, biological matter is what carries the carbon to the bottom of the ocean. So all the life in our oceans, the plankton, the whales, dolphins and fish, all of those creatures are made up of carbon in exactly the same way that we're made of carbon. So when they die and their bodies sink to the bottom of the ocean, they carry that carbon with them. And as they decompose, they form part of these rich muds at the bottom of the ocean. And these layers lock this carbon away for up to millennia, until eventually one day they'll recycle through the ecosystem and surface again on our planet. When we talk about blue carbon, we're talking about the carbon that is stored in our coastal ecosystems. And this includes habitats like mangrove forests, salt marshes, and seagrass beds. And all of these ecosystems are incredibly effective at storing and capturing carbon. These ecosystems are known to sequester and take up this carbon and store it at almost 10 times the rate of tropical forests, which is quite remarkable. And to harness this superpower, all we need to do is to be able to protect these habitats, and where they've been damaged, to restore them. The problem now is that coastal habitats are under severe threat, primarily from developments. We all enjoy living on coastlines, and that's exactly where we find these very important habitats. We estimate that we've lost at least 30% of our blue carbon habitats around the planet already, and we're increasingly losing these habitats at a rate of 2% or more every year. We're removing habitats that have the power to restore the balance in our carbon chemistry on the planet. And when we destroy these habitats, we're actually releasing carbon dioxide straight into the atmosphere. All of these habitats play a very important role in protecting our coastlines from storm surges and from severe wave action. They also are all incredibly effective at filtering the water that runs off from the land. Many of these ecosystems are also important nursery areas. Mangroves in particular are known to be critical to supporting the young of many fish species that then go on to support fish populations out at sea. So they're actually directly supporting the food security of people that rely on seafood all over the world. They also support a number of really critically endangered species. Seagrass beds, for example, are crucial to the survival of dugongs, which are under huge threat globally, and their ranges have been reduced significantly to a large extent because of the loss of seagrass beds. Sea turtles as well rely hugely on seagrass beds. They feed on them as adults and rely on them for many of their younger life stages, whereas baby turtles, they're growing into a state where they're able to travel in the open ocean. So preserving these habitats is crucial not only for the carbon that they sequester, but also for this diversity of functions that they play both as ecosystems and in improving our daily lives. Our coastal and island marine communities are the ultimate custodians of blue carbon habitats along our coastlines. To ensure the conservation of these habitats, it's crucial that we support these communities to ensure that it's viable and sustainable for them to conserve these habitats. Fundamentally, we need to make sure that we support conservation initiatives that are actually protecting salt marsh, seagrass and mangrove habitats that are still intact. So where we haven't lost these habitats, we need to support ranger programs, conservation programs, parks that are making sure that we don't lose what we still have. Another way of supporting communities is to support programs where they are rehabilitating these habitats. There are also other ways that these habitats can benefit local communities. If they have direct industries that are associated with them, then we can support those. Things like this include mangrove honey, which is an incredibly magical product that comes out of mangroves ecosystems, and one that local communities can make a living from. And then obviously ecotourism is a very powerful tool. Any ecotourism ventures that are placing value on conserving these systems are effectively providing really strong incentives and benefits to coastal communities to conserving blue carbon habitats. Oceans Without Borders is joining the global conversation around how to develop effective ways to conserve our blue carbon habitats. This involves working with local and international stakeholders to ensure that we're part of the dynamic conversations that are leading the way in this emerging field. We're looking to identify programs and initiatives that are supporting local communities to ensure that they can conserve these habitats, and where possible, finding innovative ways to restore and rehabilitate areas that have been lost. We're also working with our guests to begin to raise awareness around issues associated with blue carbon, and to identify programs that our guests can support so that they too can offset their carbon emissions. There are lots of little ways that you can on a daily basis support marine conservation and the conservation of blue carbon habitats. Try find small ways that you can adjust your daily habits, like switching off your lights or any appliances that you're not using, reducing the amount of packaging that you buy. You could also choose to walk or cycle instead of taking the car. Make sure that you're buying goods that are produced locally, because if they don't need to travel a long distance around the world to reach you, the carbon footprint of each of those items is less. We rely on our oceans more than we know. They're responsible for about 50% of the oxygen that we breathe, and they cycle over 83% of the world's carbon cycle. Conserving these systems is critically important to both the well-being of our ecosystems and for our own well-being. Find programs that are supporting blue carbon conservation. Do everything that you can on a daily basis to reduce your carbon footprint. And let's work together to leave our oceans a better place.